attempt to get this out of the oh my god, it's so hot. Oh! Oh! That does not look delicious. Hail and well met, friends, and welcome to... well, let me put it this way. I'm still relatively early in my YouTube video making journey. I have a few hundred subscribers as of the making of this video, and I'm about 5% of the way towards the number of public watch hours you need in a year in order to be monetized. And that's why I'm making this video right now. You can't demonetize a video that wasn't monetized in the first place. And with that out of the way, let's talk about dick. Spotted dick is the name of the pudding recipe that we're making today. What? For the uninitiated, spotted dick does not refer here to a with freckles. It does in fact refer to a rather old British steamed or boiled pudding, which is made using a simple suet dough that is studded with raisins or currants, hence the spots in the dick. To modern ears, the name sounds a little bit rude. Indeed, apparently the Houses of Parliament changed its name to Spotted Richard on their canteen menus, the cowards. But I'm doubtful as to it actually having a rude meaning. But more on that later. As such, and as is my apparent interest around here, I could conceivably just reproduce a contemporary recipe from like a supermarket website or whatever, but where's the fun in that? Today I want to delve into the dampened depths of history and hopefully haul out the closest approximation I can make to the kind of spotted dick people would have been making around the time of its earliest historical record. Which, as far as we know, comes from Alexis Soyer's The Modern Housewife, which was published in 1849. Anyway, for this recipe, you will need puff pastry, sultanas, plain flour, butter, brown sugar, a pudding cloth, and some kind of kitchen twine. The actual recipe in Soyer's book, such as it is, reads thus. Entry number 764, plum bolster or spotted dick. Roll out 2 pounds of paste, number 685, having some Smyrna raisins well washed, and place them on it here and there, roll over, tie in a cloth, and boil 1 hour, and serve with butter and brown sugar. Well, this sounds weird, but what the heck, let's give it a go and see how this one turns out. It's worth noting that the paste that he references in this recipe, number 685, is a suet puff pastry. And while suet in the period would have been, you know, like an animal fat, like a beef suet kind of thing, I don't eat beef food, so I'm using vegetable suet today. As far as I can tell, it behaves just like beef suet in the recipe, so as long as you're not actively seeking a hint of cow flavor in your pudding, you're not going to be able to tell the difference anyways. And here's one I started earlier. Nope, let's just ignore the just roll box you can see on screen. I definitely made this puff pastry from scratch for this video, even though rolling out pastry dough is one of the few aspects of baking that really gives me the sensory ick for some reason. So that's one of the few things that I don't do. And honestly, puff pastry is a real pain in the backside to make and it takes hours. Shopbot is fine. Shopbot is fine, okay? Anyways, I am sure that if Shopbot puff pastry existed in Alexis Soyer's time, he would have been telling you to use it too. Right? Anyways, having read the ingredients on the box of this standard supermarket ready-rolled non-butter-based puff pastry, I found that the vegetable fats that they use were actually the same ones that they use in vegetable suet. So I figure it ought to be a fairly good one-to-one comparison anyways. Now, I'm only using half of a thing of puff pastry for this because, to be honest, there's only 2 of us in the house, and if it turns out that it is extremely nasty, that just feels like wasting a lot of food. So I'm gonna go ahead and slice this in halvesies and save the other puff pastry for something that I actually know will be delicious another day. Anyway, let's take our sultanas, and it's worth noting here that our dear friend Alexis has not graced us with quantities, so I'm having to kind of go out on somewhat of a limb here and make an educated guess as to what I think is an appropriate amount. I've sprinkled these out into a reasonably even layer, and I'm going to try and pat them down a bit so they don't shift around, as there's literally no other filling in this besides sultanas. I feel like you want a sprinkle of sugar, a pinch of cinnamon, maybe a rasp of lemon zest would be nice. No! Alexis says no. Sultanas is it. Sultanas it's gonna be. So the instructions now say to roll over, and my best guess is that I need to roll this up into a kind of swirly, roly-poly like you would a cinnamon bun. But where a cinnamon bun has a spreadable filling that easily adheres itself to the dough, as you can see, I'm struggling here to get the misshapen landscape of raisins to stay in place and easily spiral up without the sultanas dislodging and falling out every time I go. It's deeply awkward to do this. Help. Meanwhile, I've prepared a pudding cloth. If you've never worked with a pudding cloth before, which I hadn't before this project, be aware of the fact that while it is cheap and easy, unlike me, for I am a luxury few can afford, it's not necessarily something that is super easy to buy in and of itself. For instance, there are a lot of kitchen cloths available out there that I could find. There's cheesecloths, there's nut milk bags, that sort of thing that's intended really to strain the liquid out of yogurt to make cheese, or to strain the milk out of your soaked and ground almonds, oats, cashews, whatever you make milk out of. These aren't necessarily going to have the right weave and porousness that you need for a pudding. I was genuinely concerned that if I got just a cheesecloth or something like that, I might end up in a situation where I boil my pudding, I come back and I find that like a third of it has disintegrated into the pudding water. So instead, I went to a major online retailer of fabrics here in the UK and was able to pick up half a meter of a nice mid-weight, unbleached, pre-shrunk cotton calico. And as you can see, it's got a nice, fairly solid weave on it, so there's not a lot, it's not a very gauzy fabric. You can kind of see a bit of light through it, but it's reasonably tightly woven, and I think that's going to make for a much more solid pudding making experience. In the interest of full disclosure, I should let you know that I did actually use the cloth before sewing down and finishing the raw fabric edges, which I really should have done first. But the results weren't as disastrous as I feared that they might have been. Actually, to be honest, it was fine. But with that being said, and in the interest of not having you repeat my mistakes, because honestly, I should know better and I'm passing that wisdom on to you, just tuck the raw ends under and just fell them down with a nice little stitch. And they'll be absolutely fine. So basically, to prepare my pudding cloth, I basically just popped it into a large pan of boiling water for about a minute or two, fished it out again carefully because it was very, very hot, and then just wrung it out nicely so that it was damp but not wet. I note that Alexis's recipe doesn't actually mention whether or not you need to sprinkle flour on the inside of the cloth. But I don't know if this is because he knows that cooks of this period will know to do this, or because I really don't need to. But for the absolute avoidance of having the finished pudding adhere itself inextricably to the inside of the cloth, I decided to do it anyway. And now I just need to neatly arrange the thing into a handsome, tidy little package, folding the cloth snugly and comfortably around it and tying off with some twine. That looks good to me! And in fairness, this is baby's first boiled pudding, but I feel like in the amount of time that I've spent baking and learning about baking, that I've probably amassed a little bit of baker's intuition about these sorts of things, I suppose. I mean, I've written 2 cookbooks for whatever that's worth. Link in the description. Like and subscribe. But also, like, wow, this pudding really looks like a sad burrito. I'm just gonna go ahead and oh, okay, so it turns out it's actually really hard to do this one-handed while you're trying to film with your other hand. So I've just gone ahead and decided to enlist the skills and talents of my beautiful partner, who is also an excellent photographer in his own right, to help with the filming of this shot. I couldn't film this part because I only had one hand free, but I've just tied this end into a little knot. It's fairly loose, but that's okay. And then I am carrying it along over to this side. I'm just going to tuck it under
like this. And then we're going to tie another knot here, like so. And now we have a little parcel with a handle, ready to boil.
That's better. Now it's time to send off our very first spotted dick to have a lovely spa day. Have a good swim, little pudding. We'll see you in an hour. Alexis doesn't mention this either, but it's really worth just popping your head back into the kitchen about halfway through cooking to check on it. I noticed that mine really wanted to float to the top of the water, and I was worried about it getting an even cooking because of this. So I just took a wooden spoon and kind of carefully gave it a little bit of a flip, and also topped up the boiling water to make sure that it didn't dry out. And when an hour was up, I just kind of had to hope that the pudding was fully cooked. It's not really something you can easily just sort of peek into and check on when it's all tightly parceled up like that. But it turns out that in this case, Mr. Alexis Soyer knew of whence he spoke. But let's check back in with Kitchen Sammy for the reveal.
So this is very hot and very wet, but it smells kind of good. So I'm gonna snip. Oh man, this twine is harder to snip when it's wet. Take the strings away, and then attempt to get this out of the... Oh my god, it's so hot. Oh! Oh! That does not look delicious. Oh! Yum! This is gonna be good. Okay, well, that looks like a wrinkly, anemic, slimy, it feels slimy, textured lump. Let's just make a slice. Will we get a beautiful spiralized interior at least? Okay, well, the interior looks better. It's got a nice spiral to it, and it makes it look a little bit less bad. Alexis Soyer recommends serving this with some butter and brown sugar, so that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna take a little corner of it. Oh wow, this looks like a pudding. Yep. Okay, tasting. Tastes way better. Oh my god, tastes way better than it looks. Oh no, I like this. I think I would love this with like some toasted like sweet breadcrumbs on top. But actually it's pretty good. I think my moderator / spouse wants to try some as well. So here, let me get you a chunk, get some buttery, sugary stuff on there for you. What do you think?
Yeah, spotted dick.
Yeah, it's pretty good actually. If you want to make a spotted dick and you don't want to bother making the dough yourself, puff pastry works fine, I guess. Well, we learned something today.
And that spotted dick version won. All things considered, it was okay. Texture was not unpleasant, and I really did think that the butter and sugar gave it quite a pleasant, comforting flavor. I'll be honest, this recipe was mid. I appreciate how simple it was in terms of the ingredients, but in terms of the result, it was fine. Would I make it again? I don't know. Probably not, but it was okay. But if you're watching this and you're thinking, but that doesn't look anything like the spotted dick that my nan used to make, well, I guess it looked not enough like what Alexis Soyer's nan used to make that he completely overhauled the recipe a few years later, and there's another version that we're going to get to try. For spotted dick number 2, I'm going to see how Alexis amended the recipe for his 1854 cookbook, A Shilling Cookery for the People. It turns out it's a whole other recipe, and it probably looks a lot more like the kind of spotted dick that you grew up with, if you grew up in the sort of place that served spotted dick in school canteens and grandma's house. And indeed, I will be cross-referencing this recipe with that of the venerable Mrs. Avis Crocombe, who you might remember from the wonderful Victorian cooking series over on the English Heritage channel, which is linked down below. But there is no way in heck that I'm going to be able to go from that absolute stodge fest of a recipe directly into another massive pile of stodge without some kind of break in between, lest I give myself a tummy ache. So I guess we've got a couple of hours to dive headfirst into that segment, which I am still calling our Flag Means Facts. I do want to get to the bottom of what Dick is doing here, so I do hope that you'll join me on a sub-segment of our Flag Means Facts that I'm tentatively calling Etymological Investigations. We can't necessarily pronounce with 100% certainty how Dick got into Spotted Dick, but we do have a couple of theories I'd like to explore. For these theories, you will need two obviously relevant words: pudding and dough. Okay, and straight off the bat, I am immediately discarding the possibility that Dick here is just like the shortened form of Richard, because honestly, that just feels silly and reachy, and it feels like it comes from someone who didn't feel like doing any actual research. That being said, I am willing to entertain the possibility that a Dick refers to something altogether more demonetizable. Not because I think it's genuinely the case, but because I think it's funny. As for the word pudding, it does feel worth mentioning, as there are some interesting etymological possibilities for where we derive the modern word pudding and its meaning. The first, which dates back at least as far as the 13th century, is actually the old French word boudin, which refers to a sausage. And the culinarily minded among you may know that there are in fact a number of sausages which still exist to this day, which are referred to as some sort of a boudin in French and French language cuisines around the world. This word was imported from French into Anglo-Norman and from there into English, with some modifications along the way. I think you can see a pretty obvious linguistic through line from boudin to pudding, and indeed that may be where we get certain things like black pudding in English, which is, as far as I can tell, a kind of sausage. Considering that puddings of this time would have consisted of some kind of doughy paste that was then encased in something in a cylindrical shape and then cooked, that's not that dissimilar to the way that like a meat paste would have been encased in something and then cooked. I feel like you really can see a familial connection here, so it stands to reason that this may be where the word pudding is derived from. But this doesn't seem to suggest any derivation of the word pudding that obviously relates to the word dick, does it? So I guess we can't really make a connection between the two, and we're gonna have to look elsewhere. Case closed. Oh, no it isn't! What's this I spy on the linguistic horizon? Why, it's the Old English word puddock, which refers to a swelling, which is a very appetizing way of thinking about puddings, isn't it? If you're experiencing swelling, speak to a doctor. I suppose we can see that a pudding does expand a little bit when it cooks, similarly to swelling, I guess. And there are similar Germanic words as well that may give us some clues as to a connection, such as the Middle Low German puddig, which refers to a fat person. And I suppose that boiled puddings can look quite chubby and squishy and cute. You know, kind of like me. If I look like this, please urge me to speak to a doctor. And from puddock or puddig or similar words in related languages, I suppose we could see a pathway from pudding to dick if we drop the p. Though personally, I think that the Old French etymology for pudding holds a little bit more weight and honestly is also a little bit less gross, let's be real. But ultimately, we just don't know. But I'm also not wholly convinced that this is where dick comes from anyways. Because why? Because dough. Now, obviously, to modern ears, I feel like traveling from dough to dick feels a little bit Christina Ricci, but I think it's worth reminding ourselves of a few things. First of all, the English language is not and has never been a monolith. Consider the humble bread roll, for instance. If you travel a couple of hours in any direction across this relatively small landmass for ways of referring to a bread roll, you go to one county, it's a bap. You go to another county, it's a batch. You go to another county like 20 minutes away, it's a cob. and many, many, many more. Some I probably don't know about because I've only lived here for 10 years. And gosh only knows this language cannot agree upon how the letter sequence O-U-G-H is pronounced. Take a look at this city, roughly in the middle of the country. Now, if you've never heard the name of this place, how would you guess it's pronounced? Did you say Loughborough? Be honest with yourself. Did you say Loughborough? Because I didn't. It's also worth noting that in certain quarters, including parts of Scotland, this pudding is actually known as spotted dog. And if we look at the etymology and early cognates of dough and where it comes from, we see that it emerges from the Old English word dag. That is the minutest slip of tongue placement away from dog. Now, I feel like it's not a super far distance from dag to dough. So is it just spotted dough then? Wildly, the Oxford English Dictionary also cites a number of examples in print where a Dalmatian dog was referred to as a spotted dick. It all comes full circle. If your dog looks like this, speak to a vet. Older viewers may remember in my last video I brought up Newfoundland folk group and also boiled pudding figgy duff. Foreshadowing is a literary device which is used in... Do you see where I'm going here though? Dough, Loughborough, figgy duff. That's figgy dough, isn't it? Also, consider this. The Old English dag, with its Germanic roots, has some very interesting cognates. Middle Dutch had dich. In Middle Low German, it's dich, which I think is pronounced the same, but it is spelled differently. And Old High German had teich, dich, dick. It's not that different. Considering the vast differences in vowel pronunciations from one English city to another, it's easy to see how the word dag might have developed into dick in some parts of the country, and perhaps while the pronunciation itself may have been somewhat harmonized otherwise, it survived into the 19th century in its spotted form. Anyway, this one is certainly Mrs. Crocup's theory, which she is very quick to remind the viewer of, presumably lest they get any, notions. She's also keen to let us know that just as is mentioned in Soyer's The Modern Housewife, it is also known as plum bolster, which is meant to refer to its shape resembling that of a bolster cushion, and plum at the time was used to refer to basically any little dried fruits like raisins or currants or sultanas or whatever. That being said, with enough time, I'm sure I could bend plum bolster into some kind of euphemism for something, right? Anyway, I was just about to get the omnibus for the night. Gerard only went and whipped out his plum bolster, right in the middle of Fluffington Road. Can you believe to learn? Did he at least serve it up with thick custard? So as you can see, it's entirely coincidental that the traditional shape of the pudding is kind of long and cylindrical. Tumescent, one might even say. Seriously. What? And listen, like I said before, you can't demonetize a channel on YouTube that has not been monetized yet. Have I mentioned that I have a Patreon where the rudest bits of this video that I don't think I can show on YouTube will go? Just putting that out there. Anyway, onwards to Spotted Dick version 2. For this recipe, you will need flour, suet. I'd say other brands are available, but to be honest, I've literally never seen any other brand of suet available in the shop, so I don't know how many other brands are available. Currants, sugar, cinnamon, milk, an egg, that cloth again, and another length of your cottagecore twine. Unlike last time, we actually have to make I'm so glad I don't have to make another puff pastry entirely from scratch all over again. Wink. No, but seriously, I'm weighing up my flour into a medium-sized bowl to which I'm going to add my suet. This is baby's first time cooking with suet, and it turns out it comes in these funky little grease pellets.
Okay. I'm 3 ingredients deep and I've already run into a problem. So, the recipe that I'm using from good old Alexis calls for half a pound of beef suet. Now, bearing in mind, I'm doing all of these quantities in halvesies anyways because I'm making a smaller recipe, which is why it looks like not that much. But the recipe calls for half a pound of beef suet shredded. This is vegetable suet, but never mind, it behaves exactly the same, supposedly. And then half ditto of currants. And I'm not totally clear as to whether that means half the same measurement again, so half a pound of currants, or it means half of that measurement of currants. And unfortunately, I can't just phone up, I can't just send a DM to Alexis Soye and say, hey buddy, how many currants did you mean? So I'm just gonna have to make a guesstimate here, and I'll let you know in post which one I decided to do.
Uncertain of what the heck Alexis meant by ditto measurement, I cross-referenced with Mrs. Crocom's recipe, and it turns out that she uses equal measurements of each. So that's what I'm going to go with and hope that it's good. And in go the currants. And since I'm doing a half recipe here, that's 112.5 grams. Next, I'm reining in the sugar and waiting for my tea to finish brewing. Incidentally, I was enjoying a lovely blend of green tea with spearmint and jasmine, which is just the sort of soothing blend you need when wrestling with a spotted dick.
So, full disclosure, I over-poured the sugar into this by about 5 grams, and it's integrated enough that I'm really not able to properly scoop it back out, so it's just going to be a little bit extra sweet, but to be honest, I don't think that's going to detract.
We don't have a specific measurement for the cinnamon, but I'm generally pretty comfortable with eyeballing things like this, and to be perfectly honest, I'm just happy we're getting more flavors into this thing. So let's go for a good generous couple of shakes.
I mean, I don't think it's a lot of cinnamon. It's, you know what it is? It's not 0.4 of a gram of cinnamon, that's what it is. That'll do.
And I'm gonna go ahead and use my wooden spoon to give these ingredients a good fold together until they look nice and combined. A little something like this. I realized belatedly it might have been worth beating the egg a bit before adding it to the dough, but shh, it's gonna be fine. It's all getting stirred up very well with the milk and stuff anyways. And indeed it was fine. This set of ingredients gave me this rather wet, sticky situation you see here that I have no idea how I'm going to shape into a bolster, but I'm sure Alexis Soye was a celebrity chef for a reason, so I'm just going to go ahead and trust the process. As per last time, we're flouring our cloth, and given how sticky the dough is, we're making sure every centimeter of cloth that might touch Dick has been dusted. Now to turn the dough out nicely onto the cloth, forming it into the shape of a bolster cushion. It is a bolster cushion and does not resemble anything else. We've been through this. The name probably means dough.
Oh boy, this is quite sticky. How am I gonna do this? Just gonna scrape, and just let it kind of flop out onto this very well-floured cloth. Oh, that is not forming the shape I wanted it to. Oh, good. Just give that a good scrape down. All right, I think that's about it. Okay. Now that it's there, I want to kind of shape it into a vague bolster appearance looking shape and fold it over again, and really just get that all nice and tucked into bed as best as I can. Okay, that's a spotted dick, hopefully. Yay!
Once it's all tucked into its cozy little blanket, we are tying it off in the same manner as last time with our handsome cottagecore twine.
I am scared that this is not going to work. Oh, geez, friends. Feeling a little bit nervous about it, but here it is. Yay! A spotted dick, hopefully.
And here's what it looks like all dressed and ready to go. I've got a pot of water on the boil again, and off goes Spotted Dick number 2 for its relaxing visit to the spa for about an hour and a half. have a nice time. I'm checking on this at 30-minute intervals, topping up with additional boiling water as steam escapes. I found it useful to actually offset the lid slightly as it boils to keep it from boiling over and making an absolute disgusting gloopy mess of my hob. And just like that, the time has elapsed, so it's time to fish this greasy parcel out of the water and see what the heck happened in there.
Alright, here we go. Spotted Dick version 2.0. The attempted reveal. Come on, snip, snip. Snippity snip. That wasn't a full snip. Gonna try not to snip the fabric as I do that. Ugh. Oh god, it's so wet. I gotta tell you, the cooking water was like so greasy this time, which did not happen before. So I honestly don't know what to expect here. I mean, that twine is dead because it has been marinating in suet for the past hour and a half, but let's attempt to uncover this pudding. Oh, I'm so scared. Oh, wow, that's a steamed pudding. Oh my goodness. It's worked. It's worked pretty perfectly. I mean, again, wow. I was so afraid, but that actually looks, I mean, it looks disgusting. It looks like a disgusting, sweaty blob of, quite greasy, but it smelled really good towards the end of cooking, so I'm kind of confident that this is going to be nice. That was not filming at all. I had not pressed record. But you can see a cross-section of the first slice here, and it's quite stodgy. There's still a lot of steam coming out of it because it's just been boiling for a while. But let's plate it up and do a little taste. So for the plating, Alexis recommends butter and sugar again. I've gone ahead with brown sugar. He didn't specify, but I thought the brown sugar was really, really nice. So I've actually gone ahead and melted the brown sugar and the butter together just for like 20 seconds in the microwave. Shh, let's just pretend that they had a microwave in the 19th century for a second. I'm going to taste this in and of itself first. So I'm going to give this a go. It's bland. It's bland. And the texture is kind of weird. A little bit sweet. I get the cinnamonness just towards the end. I think it's gonna need the source, as it were. So let's do an artful dribble. Okay. It's been sauced. I'm gonna try it again. Okay. I think the reason this is nice is because there's butter and brown sugar in it. Also, one of those currants had a pip, and it's very crunchy. So, I don't know. You could make this if you want to. It's okay. It's okay. I don't actually know if I like this better than the first one. Okay, my partner's here. I'm gonna plate up a little spoonful for him and see what he thinks. Here you go, babe. What are your thoughts?
A spotted dick?
Is that exactly as it should be?
Yeah.
Right, well apparently
Right.
This is exactly as it should be.
Needs custard. But...
We're gonna try it again later with custard.
I cannot stress how incredibly greasy everything was at this point. So much of the fat from the suet actually leached out into the cooking water that by the time it was done, the water was greasy, the twine was greasy, the cloth was so greasy that I had to immediately put it into the washing machine after wringing it out into the sink with my hands and finding my hands so coated in suet that I had to double cleanse with washing up liquid to make my hands be not greasy. To which end I suppose that maybe suet actually makes for a really good moisturizer. But personally, I would just buy moisturizer. I guess I'd been lulled into something of a false sense of security in the past by the spotted dicks that I've bought from the supermarket. You know, the ready-made ones that come in little potos that you just have to warm up in the microwave and just taste like a nice, rich, plain sponge with raisins or currants in. This, on the other hand, is a whole other kettle of dick. As you can see, as it sets up and cools, it becomes kind of a rubbery brick. But in fairness, in a little rewarm in the microwave, it does come back to that dense, spongy, sort of chewy texture that I suppose it's what it's supposed to be like.
That's at least as good as a leftover as it is in the first place.
And I do agree with Mrs. Crocom's assessment that it is best served with a nice thick custard. If you are interested in understanding history by way of eating things that people in the past might have enjoyed, then maybe, yeah, you should try it. If you're just looking for an easy, comforting pudding, then no, don't make this. To be honest, you can probably get equal or better results by just using a more contemporary recipe that uses the microwave, not to mention the fact that this will also save on cleanup because you won't have grease everywhere, and you also won't be running, you know, your hob on full boil for an hour and a half of your life, which probably will contribute to your bills to a greater degree than running the microwave for a few minutes. With all that being said, though, I will say that making these made the house smell amazing. And there you have it. Spotted dick. Video actually wasn't quite as rude as I thought it was going to be, though some of the extra rude bits will be reserved for my good friends over on Patreon, so if you do want to see uncut spotted dick, do consider subscribing over there. I do hope that you enjoyed this little historical journey in which we plumbed the depths of Victorian delights, and if you did enjoy this kind of thing and you haven't subscribed already, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. If you have anything you want to share, feel free to sound off in the comments. And if you like this video, you could just click that little thumbs up if you want to. No pressure, obviously, but it really does help the channel, apparently. Who knows, maybe with more support I'll actually be able to put videos out more regularly. I would really love to, honestly. But regardless, I would like to thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope you have a splendid day.